It's time to loosen these lug nuts. Let's get at it. Hey everybody, I'm Nick, and today I'm going to be doing a power steering hose upgrade and a power steering flow restrictor upgrade on my 1988 Chevy Caprice in prep for Autocross at LS Fest. If I have time, I'm also going to be upgrading to these SPC adjustable upper control arms today. Alright, so if I'm going to get these SPC uppers installed today, one of the first things I have to do is I have to get these Moog ball joints prepped and ready to go in them. I just hit them with some brake cleaner. I'm going to hit them with brake clean again just to make sure that there's not too much nasty stuff on the surface of them. And then I'm going to give them a real quick coat of Rust-Oleum so that hopefully they won't get super crusty super fast. So I'm going to use this Rust-Oleum rust reformer stuff. Obviously these parts aren't rusty, but I like the way this stuff lays down. It leaves a nice satin finish, and I've been super happy with it every time I've used it. Doesn't really flake or anything like that, so I'm gonna do a light coat here. Come back in a few minutes, touch it up. Now I wanted to paint these things first so that if I get to installing these control arms today, the ball joints are good and dry, ultra ready, safe to install, no need to worry about anything. So what I've got right here, I've got the turn 1, there's the part number, it's a turn 1 power steering flow restrictor. And this is a power steering hose for, I think, a Cadillac Eldorado. This goes from the pump to the Hydro Boost. That's the part number. The reason I went with this hose is because it's the longest one that I could find, and the hose that I had, which is for an 85 Caprice diesel, is just a little short. It's very tight, and I don't care for the way that it is. So what I'm doing right now is just doing a quick mock-up before I get this thing, the car, actually taken apart. This is supposed to be for a Saginaw P-type pump, which is what I believe the stock LS truck pumps are, and that's what I'm running, is a stock LS truck pump. And the Cadillac that this came off of, which I think is a late 80s, might be an early 80s, I'm not sure, you can look up the part number. The Cadillac that this hose is for is a O-ring fitting in the pump and in, move this so you can see, and at the Hydro Boost. It also was supposed to be an O-ring fitting at the steering gear. To a certain point, sometime I think in the late 70s, these were inverted flare fittings, which also work, but you need different fittings for them. You wouldn't be able to use this part. I would recommend upgrading to the O-ring style. It's just easier to find parts for. They made the stuff longer, and they made it a lot more recently, so my car, being an 88, already had that, so that's what I went with. But what I'm doing right now is I'm mocking this up. I just wanted to make sure that this does actually thread onto here, right? Because this is going to replace the piece that's currently installed in the pump. And they do, they thread together. The other thing that I wanted to do is just look in here. The quality of machining is good, very good. I have no reason to believe that Turn 1 doesn't make high quality stuff. But when you're looking in there, just make sure that there's no burrs, that it was blown out properly. And it was. Everything's good. Same thing on your hose. You should inspect that. And obviously, with this Edelman hose, it did not come with the O-rings pre-installed. So I'm going to install those when I go to put it together. And I'm also going to lube all the O-rings. And I'm also going to probably see if I can put some anti-seize or at least some grease on the threads. Steel to aluminum, and then this aluminum piece is going to go into what's probably a steel housing on the pump. You don't want any of that stuff to gall. Make it really hard to take apart in the future if you ever need to. Kind of waiting for this to dry right now, so I might go have a snack or something, then come back and get this together. So real quick, I got the car back here in the back driveway. It's a little easier to work on. Before I tear into it, I want to show you this hose. Get it mocked up here. This hose is definitely longer. And from down here, it actually comes back at kind of a nicer angle for the way my setup is. Much deeper angle, actually, which I like. I'm happy about. So I'm actually super happy with this hose. It's almost too long, whereas this hose was too short. And yeah, I'm just gonna get it on here. Get that other turn one piece on here. Get something underneath it so I can catch any fluid that happens to leak out while I'm doing it. Probably raise the front up a little bit and get after it. So I got the old hose off. I'm losing power steering fluid slowly, but that's fine. Found out this is actually a 1-inch wrench. I'm gonna pop the old one out. See about getting this one in. I took a tiny bit of all-purpose chassis grease that I had laying around and just lubricated this up good so I don't bugger up that O-ring, and so that hopefully the threads won't gall and come out. Not sure what happened to my anti-seize. Let's see if I can pop this out one-handed. Oh, is that tight or did it come? Oh, it loosened. Good. I was afraid of that. Not wanting to come loose. I have to set the phone down anyway though. So I got the old piece out. It's steel, it's much heavier. Just for comparison's sake, to be honest, they don't look too different. So hopefully this does what I need it to do. If it doesn't, I'll be back to the drawing board. Hopefully that actually restricts the flow like I think it's going to. Like it's supposed to. Because that hole doesn't look bigger. If anything, it looks smaller in this one, but... oh no, maybe it is a little bigger. Yeah, it definitely is bigger. That's good. I was feeling somewhat concerned about that. I don't know how much you can tell. It's not massively bigger, but it definitely is bigger. So I'm gonna get this piece in there and see what happens. So with the new flow restrictor installed, I've got this O-ring installed on the new hose. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus. There we go. O-ring installed on the new hose. So I got the hose on. Definitely not nearly as tight. This hose is a lot longer than the other one was. More than I realized it would be even. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to set the car down, maybe jack it up in the middle so both wheels are off the ground. I'm going to try to bleed the power steering system real quick, turn the wheels, pump the brake pedal a few times, and see what we end up with for steering feel before I go any further. So I'm going to be honest, the steering feel doesn't really feel any different than I was anticipating. I know turn one makes a couple of smaller ones that are smaller than what this was supposed to call for. So maybe I'm expecting miracles that can't exist, but yeah, probably not going to change it again before LS Fest, but yeah, kind of underwhelmed, to be honest. It's okay though. It was a fairly cheap attempt to fix it. So with the new power steering restrictor installed, even though it doesn't seem to have made much difference, I'm just going to keep plugging along. I'm going to change these upper control arms. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to assemble the arms with the ball joints. So this is what the arms look like. They have actually what I think is a rubber bushing right here. And you can't focus on that. Rubber bushing right here, I think, which is pretty cool. It's supposed to ride really nicely. If I decide I don't like how these are, or if they wear out, they make a Delrin piece to replace this. But this is what the control arms look like. Got this pretty beefy plate. It's welded nicely here with this stud. This side allows for articulation. The Moog ball joints, just gonna drop right in like that. Couple key things that I got to keep in mind while I'm installing these things is, one, these bushing housings are not symmetrical in every direction, right? So they actually have an offset to them, which you can see right here. The offset has to be up. It moves the control arm away from the frame of the car per their instructions. Additionally, this stud needs to be towards the front of the car. So those are things to keep in mind. I'm probably going to have to flip one side or the other, because I think the arms come identical the way that they're assembled, but that'll be easy. I'll just take it apart here, flip the cross shaft, and it'll be backwards. Super easy. So I'm going to run these down. I'm not going to tighten them all the way per the instructions. I'm just going to run this down so that this is close, not all the way. So I've got everything on the passenger side arm snugged down to almost tight, but not quite. Still all a little bit loose, except for the ball joint bolts. Those are all tightened down. Ball joint's not going anywhere. Moving on to the next arm. So I've got both arms put together. The driver's side and the passenger side. I want to point out that I called this one the passenger side earlier, and it's actually the driver's side. My mistake. Another thing I want to point out real quick for anyone that might be doing these parts on their own car is SPC is very clear. I'll reiterate, the offset should be up, moving the arm away from the vehicle frame, like this, right? But also, they're clear that cars with tall knuckles, a replacement ball joint is okay. That's the ball joint I'm using, the Moog part number. But also, they recommend an extended upper ball joint for like G-body, something that doesn't have the taller spindle like the B-body cars have. I would definitely recommend that you get that if you don't have a tall spindle car. All right, so I'm going to pull the wheels off right now and get to it. I don't know why I just removed those in a star pattern. You don't really need to remove them like that. All right, so a couple things with this. First off, the upper control arm, the factory style, or most of the tubular replacement styles, have a bump stop pad, like a droop stop pad on them, that I want to take the pressure off of the control arm before I attempt to remove it. Additionally, the shock is going to become the new droop stop, and that's fine. That's how the shocks are on the rear that hold up the axle. They're no bigger. Most modern cars don't have a droop stop. I'm not at all worried about that. SPC is not worried about that. There's no problem with that. But what I'm going to do, I've got the floor jack underneath this, underneath the lower ball joint, and I'm just going to, just enough that that droop stop's no longer touching. So when I pull the upper control arm off of the spindle, I don't have to worry about any kind of interference or problem there. The other thing is, I've got this bungee cord right here, and I may have to adjust it, make it tighter or something. I don't want the spindle to just flop all over creation and damage a brake hose or something when I'm doing this. So just a couple things to keep in mind, and I'm going to keep moving forward. So with the cotter pin and the nut off, the jack's still under it, still not on the droop stop, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to slowly release it, let the spring pressure separate that for me. That'll only work if these are semi-recently put together like these are. If you got something that's been apart for a long time, that probably won't do it. Slowly let it down. I'm fine with the shock being the droop stop like that. That's fine, that's not a problem. I want to make sure this doesn't flop around too much. And that looks like that's perfect. Okay, so with the control arm free down below, I've got these two 19mm nuts right here that I'm going to be removing. There's one here and there's one here. And I'm just gonna get these loosened off. I'm gonna be here probably a little while getting that taken care of, but this is gonna loosen the control arm. Hopefully I'll be able to get it off. Probably gonna end up pulling the steering shaft off at some place just to be able to get it apart, but we'll see. I hope not. All right, so now with those nuts removed, these crappy washers, let's see if I can finagle the control arm out of there without pulling the steering shaft. Let's see. Probably not. Am I hitting the steering shaft? Hitting? I don't even seem to have reached the steering. Oh, no, I'm not. Hitting the control arm bracket. Now I think I'm hitting the steering shaft. There we go. Come on. Yeah, there we go. All right, not the ideal way to do that. Pop the studs out of their spots, but easier than pulling the steering shaft. Come on, son. There we go. All right, so I was able to pop these studs out of their holes, and then take the old control arm out, put the new control arm in, push them back through, and then actually what I did is I just took an extension, I hit them with a hammer to reseat the studs. It's going to be perfect, going to be mint. Get these nuts run back down, and then we can get to kind of lining up and adjusting the control arm. Actually, we'll just install the ball joint, and then once it's probably on the ground, we'll adjust and tighten up, and that'll be kind of a pain, but it'll be worth it. All right, with the control arm reinstalled, I'm gonna get this put back together. I'm putting just a touch of grease on the ball joint surface, holding on the threads just because, and then I'm gonna use the jack because the spindle is now not high enough. I'm going to use the jack to just gently raise things back up a little bit. Okay, be careful if you're doing this at home. In fact, I'm going to have to reposition the jack, I think. See. Well, it's still fine. It's not great for the lower ball joint, but it's okay. All right, that's together. Should have brought the nut over here. Nothing's touching. I'm just checking. All right. Just what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to make sure that actually is touching right there. So that's not fantastic. I know the control arm's gonna have to be extended. It's pretty apparent from here. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and I'm gonna see about playing with that right now. And now nothing's touching. That's awesome. Out with the old and with the new. Now this can't be properly adjusted, unfortunately, until the whole thing is on the ground. So it's about all that I'm gonna get out of that. Yeah, but that's okay. All right, to be honest, that was more of a task than I thought it was gonna be, but it's on the ground. I've got an eyeball alignment. Seems like this side must be sagging or something more than the other side because I can't get, I'm afraid to go as far. I'll let the alignment shop go further. I can't get as a little camber on the driver's side as I can on the passenger side, so we'll see what the deal with that is. Definitely have more negative camber over here, but that's okay. So I'm gonna do a quick test drive and see how it feels. All right, so the steering feels like it returns to center a little better. Pretty sure that's an increase in caster due to these new control arms and the way that I adjusted them. I'm going to go up and down the street a little bit more. If I let go of the wheel, it's not the fastest return to center, but it definitely returns to center a lot better. This is such a crappy road. Just went through a huge dip that was a lot deeper than I thought it was. That was kind of exciting. This thing is low, low, low. All right, I'm gonna run down the hill here real quick, see if I can get it up to 50, maybe 55 miles an hour. I think the speed limit's 50. I don't know what the speed limit is. Big street, so it'll be okay. Well, I'm gonna be honest, the steering does feel better going around corners. I think it's more the caster than that steering flow restrictor, but it definitely feels better going around corners, like a lot better. So I can't really tell you, right? I can't really show you how this feels different, but the steering is just a little bit heavier. It never gets ultra light at least up till about 50 miles an hour. That's as fast as I've actually had this thing. Right now it's about 50 miles an hour. The steering never gets ultra light like it did. It got ultra light very quickly, and the increased caster I really think has done a lot to help the steering feel, it feels better, like it stays more on center. I don't know how to explain it. The return to center is definitely better at low speed, just driving on the street. It's still not what I would call modern return to center, like rack and pinion type return to center, but it is a ton better, and I'm actually pretty happy with it now. this is going to be a lot more road trip worthy the way that it feels. I still have to replace the steering components. The truth is I probably don't have to. They're probably fine. They're not that old. They're not in horrible shape. But I'm going to replace them simply because I know that my idler arm has play in it. The other stuff doesn't appear to have play, but it's old enough. It's only a few years old, but it's got enough miles on it. They're hard miles. They're a little crusty, and by putting this Proforged setup on that I'm going to put on, I'll be able to have everything brand new, have a great alignment that should last at least a couple years. So yeah, I'm super excited for that. All right, so the last thing I need to do today is remake this hose right here. It's been leaking for a little while now. It's not leaking horribly. I think it's leaking at the connection between the actual hose itself and the fitting up here. So I'm going to be popping that off and just remaking it. So if you're making AN hoses, like PTFE hoses, get yourself a set of loppers. They make making your cut so much easier. Totally worth it. Got my fitting, right? Got a big mess on the workbench, so it is what it is. Undo your fitting. Make sure you have your little ferrule. The collar you're going to work over. Drop it on the ground. Just gonna squish this rounder. Try not to crush the hose. I put the hose in the vise to make this a little bit easier, but I'm trying real hard not to crush the hose, obviously. There we go. Peel your tape off. You're going to take something like a tiny screwdriver, and you're going to pull the braid away from the PTFE. Now, I like to, at this point, take the fitting and kind of use it, work it in here, just reshape everything so it's round again, right? Make sure there's none of this stainless right up against your PTFE. And then you're going to take the little, whatever you call this, olive or ferrule or whatever you call this. It's going to go on here. And you really have to make sure that there's no stainless getting caught underneath it. If there's any of the stainless between it and the PTFE, you're going to have a leak. That may be what happened to me before, I'm not sure. Then you're going to put it on there, and it's got to be pressed all the way down. There we go. And then you're going to put this piece on there, and it's going to be pressed all the way down. And then you take your threaded piece and work it back up. Now, if you were doing this the right way and you were a little more baller than I am, you would have a set of soft jaws. I don't have the soft jaws, so I'm just going to use my crappy jaws. Doesn't need to be crazy tight. I'm going to take my wrench. I'm going to take my AN wrench, right, because that's what this is. It's fantastic. And the whole thing is just turn this into the other piece. Now you can actually do this with 2 wrenches. You do not need a vise at all for this process, but the vise definitely makes it a lot easier. I'm beating these up. I'm in a hurry, trying to knock this out. When they're all the way together, you're done. and you butcher the other side too, just like that. All right, let me get this back on the car here, start it, look for leaks. Probably call it a day after that. Alright, no sign of a further leak, so I'm going to roll with that.